Air conditioning scam. My browser opens to the free stuff on Craigslist. I obtained a nice patio swing this way. It isn't new, but it's okay. A new one is $700. If it's free, how good does it have to be? Some people pick up washers and dryers and they repair them. It's easy to learn how to fix them. They're not very complicated. People make a little side money this way. Recently, I advertised on Craigslist to give away a nice Whirlpool dryer that didn't work. Needed some parts. A man called for it and shortly thereafter showed up at my door to get it. I was eager to get rid of it, and he seemed eager to get it free. This is what I call win-win. Normally, those who come for free stuff are poor, and so I was surprised that this guy was driving a big, beautiful, new red truck. I wish I was the owner of that truck. So right away I'm wondering what's going on here with this guy in the big, new red truck. We loaded the dryer into the bed of the truck, and he was about to drive off. Then he said, "Ordinarily I do air conditioning." I quickly jumped on that opportunity. I said, "My system needs Freon, but it's R22. I diagnosed it myself. It seemed to be low on refrigerant. It was not blowing cold air. What would you assume the problem was? It's a 4-ton Rheem air conditioner, 10-seer. I don't want to charge it with refrigerant that costs an arm and a leg. R22 is very expensive. I was thinking of converting the system to 134A. When you do this, you have to put in new seals because the compressor will blow out. The system is made for a particular refrigerant and you can't mix them. This refrigerant is so expensive that recharging the system with R22 could exceed the cost of an entirely new condenser, so I'm thinking conversion instead of recharge. My reasoning is that once you switch out of R22, you don't have to pay mafia prices for refrigerant. The only question is, will the unit last? It wasn't made for 134A, and there are problems to consider. I don't see the justification of buying more of this antiquated, discontinued, and obsolete refrigerant, which has become scarce since it was outlawed. Every year, R22 becomes more scarce and more expensive. Today, it's over $100 per pound and rising very fast. Another consideration I've read about, there is no way to measure how much R22 you're getting, so you're getting experienced when these guys come out to recharge your unit. They leave with so many bags of your money that you have to use a dolly and forklift to load it into their shiny new red truck. The technician took a look at my air conditioning unit and frankly, his skills impressed me at first. He seemed adept and knew exactly what to do. I gathered that he was the type of guy who has vast knowledge about many things, including Whirlpool dryers. That's probably why he picked up mine, and I'm sure he can easily fix it. If not, the salvage value might justify his time in coming for it and looking at the issues with it. The motor inside has a lot of copper. The steel is worth something, but not much. If he has parts for it and just combines the parts to make one working unit and sells it, it might be worth it. But wait until I tell you about his racket in air conditioning. You'll wonder why he even bothers with Whirlpool dryers. He told me that he makes some money on the side repairing dryers and selling them, but the air conditioning business is his main job. After my experience with this technician, I'd say the air conditioning business is the gold mine, and you will soon see why I say that. What these guys do is not criminal, but maybe it should be because it's robbery. Like most professionals, those who know things take advantage of those who don't, and so in order to protect yourself, you must become aware. Watch YouTube videos made to tell you things, like air conditioning and auto repair tasks. The more you know, the fewer bags of money these crooks can take from you. When a major appliance goes out, people don't know what went wrong, especially old women, who I think are most vulnerable to the thieves. Few consumers know how many parts there are or what each one does. The public knows nothing about the cost of these parts. From what I have learned, the air conditioner is really very simple. In a week or less, one can begin to acquire the knowledge needed for troubleshooting air conditioning problems. I did it in less than 1 hour. I found a website that showed my exact unit, and it had the same problem I had, so I know you can do it too. We have a powerful weapon, the internet, so we can research and find videos and websites to help us understand quickly. Often these videos show your exact unit, as in my case. There is a fan and a condenser, which many of you know about. But there is also a capacitor which stores electricity and a contactor which has something that looks like points on an old car. I'm not a technician or a mechanic, but I still find this all quite fascinating. I am still learning and my mind is still growing new neural pathways. The capacitor stores 370 volts. I have become aware that some capacitors store 440 volts. So the capacitor stores electricity. That's simple enough. I still don't understand why normal electricity doesn't do all that is needed, but I'm not going to try to master any information that isn't relevant to my task of getting this Rheem 10-seer working again. You don't want to touch the posts of the capacitor because the electric shock can hurt you. There is a way to discharge the electricity in the capacitor if you want to do it yourself and work on your own air conditioner. I highly recommend that you watch 100 YouTube videos about your model prior to doing anything on your own unit because capacitors can shock you. Technicians can shock you also. Just look at their bill for services. It's like 440 volts. So which jolt do you prefer? The jolt from the capacitor can be managed. The jolt from a technician's bill can break you. It can break an old woman on Social Security too. Husband dead, fixed low income thanks to our government and a bunch of freeloaders in Congress spending, and raising the spending limits. How did these old people make it? They choose between medicine and rent, and food isn't funded in some households. The pharmaceutical industry is worse, with 70% of Americans taking some form of prescription drug. There isn't any shame. It's all about money, not people. So I want to do something about it. I want to change the world. Are you with me? I want you to have the benefit of my experience. I want you to be aware of what's being done to people. The crooks can't gouge you if you know their game plan, deception, and fraud. You just say, I'll consider it, and send them on their way. I watched some videos about air conditioning units. One technician said that the voltage in a capacitor isn't enough to kill you, but it can hurt you. He went into more detail telling the viewer how to discharge the capacitor, but I won't try to convey the lesson he gave in his video. You have to touch the commons to the condenser and the commons to the fan, and that's all I want to say. This is not a video about how to do your own air conditioning repairs. It's about the practices of dishonest technicians who attempt to gouge you. In Arizona, it's a felony to scam anyone over the age of 65. It's called senior abuse, exploitation of the elderly for financial gain. Financial exploitation. Don't think they created this government agency for the benefit of old people. They're looking for assets and seizing them whenever they can. Government is just one more racket that preys on people. Let's go back to the scam. What happened next is interesting, and I think you can benefit from my experience. Maybe you won't fall into the same trap that was planned for me, but I got lucky, escaped, and now I'm here to tell you about it. The Rheem unit I have dates to December of 2002. For the past 3 years since my unit stopped blowing cold air, I just used the swamp cooler. It's on the roof, and it does a good job in spring and fall. On some summer days, it's useless though. Yesterday it was blowing colder than ever, 55 degrees. This is the swamp cooler, not my air conditioner. There are no days in winter when I need air conditioning. In summer, when it's very hot and very humid, a swamp cooler or evaporative cooler is useless. But in spring, it's so cold that I have to go outside in the sun just to warm up. In southern Arizona in midsummer, the temperatures can rise to 125 degrees Fahrenheit, and the wildlife often drop dead. The record in Phoenix might be 134 degrees. That's what someone told me. Sometimes the rabbits come in nearly dead, and they drink for 3 minutes straight. When they leave, they do a dance to show their happiness at finding water finally. Birds collect on the shady side of the house, and if I go there, it startles them and they fly away in a flock. Animals seek water and shade, and if they don't get both, they're dead here in the Sonora Desert. We have 4 months of temperatures over 100 degrees every day. This is when I can no longer depend upon the swamp cooler or evaporative cooler to keep my cool. During the monsoon season, which is from June 15th to September 15th, it's rainy. That makes it hot and humid at the same time, so I need to be more comfortable. For these 3 months, I need an air conditioner. You might say that I have a great incentive to repair my unit. At the same time, I want to avoid being overcharged, just as you would, and that's why I'm making a video about my experience. The guy who came here for the free Whirlpool dryer mentions that he's an air conditioning guy, and I ask him to give me a price on converting the Freon system. It's R22 and I want to go 134A. He said he would take a look at it and remove 4 screws to get to the insides of the system. There are only 4 things there: a fan, a condenser, and 2 electrical parts. One is a capacitor and the other is a contactor. He began by testing the pressure of the refrigerant. The pressure in the lines tested normal, so R22 refrigerant was unlikely the cause of the problem. That was welcome news. Now the question is, what's wrong with my air conditioning unit? He pushed down the contactor and it made a weird spark. He said that's not normal. So now we have a new reason as to why my air conditioning system doesn't work, or at the very least, a clue about the cause. It's not always the Freon, I learned. We are diagnosing the cause of the failure of my air conditioning system to cool the house. So my 2002 4-ton Rheem air conditioner isn't blowing cool air, and I thought it was the Freon. The technician used his gauges and tested the lines. He found the pressure normal, and Freon was ruled out. The unit is outside and it sits on the ground, so the wind blows dirt inside, and wow, that thing was dirty. I was ashamed. I like my things shiny like a brand new truck. The condenser is on the outside, and the fan blows the heat up and away, cooling the pressurized refrigerant so it can go into the house where the pressure drops, and it's colder than that bitch Hillary Clinton. The technician tested to find the pressure normal, and he found the contactor giving a weird spark. I'm looking at 2 devices I have never seen before: the contactor, which is now suspect, and another device which the technician isn't calling by name. But that unit is a capacitor, I learned while watching YouTube videos. The technician only mentioned the contactor, and he thought I had better replace it. I asked about the price, and he said his company charges $300 for a new contactor, but he'd give me a great deal at just $200. Later, you will learn why this is laughable. He told me that the nasty spark and smell isn't right, and it was likely bad, that I should replace it. The contactor. He didn't mention the capacitor. If he knew his stuff, he would not have diagnosed the problem as the contactor. He would have known that the capacitor is the number one cause of an air conditioning unit not blowing cold air. Was he setting me up? Was he intending to scam me? Then he began to tell me how contactors corrode from each spark, and I'm thinking, why not just clean off the corrosion? Because cleaning is a 5-minute job. How much could he possibly charge me? He's already here to pick up the Whirlpool dryer, so he can't charge a service call to come out. Since I did him a favor giving him the dryer, will he do me a favor and file off the corrosion on a pair of points of contact? Not a chance. He wants to walk off with $200 of my money in his pocket. I'm standing there wanting air conditioning one day in the near future when it's 125 degrees Fahrenheit outside here in southern Arizona. The only thing standing between me and air conditioning is $200. This is how we consumers think, isn't it? It's a lot better than $1,000 for the Freon and labor. What do? Unfortunately, I agree to pay $200 for the repair. But is this all there is, or am I being set up for another swat with the fly swatter? After I agree, he says, I'll go home and get the parts. I'll be back in an hour. Then he left. Meanwhile, I'm looking for my file. I'm going to at least give this a try. I file down the points and turn on the air conditioner, and it works just fine. I call him up to announce that I've already fixed it, and he says something came up and I can't come back. I've got a call from my boss and he wants me to go to Mesa on an air conditioning call. Then he urges me not to use the air conditioner in its present condition because that part can go out again at any time. I said, so can all the parts on my car, so I better not drive until I replace everything. He argued vehemently that I need to replace that part and spend $200 or the world is going to end. I'll be dead. There'll be a famine and I'll starve to death. Lightning will come down from the heavens. God will destroy the earth. Lucifer will take over. There will be nuclear war. Every mountain will move from its position. A big tsunami will come in off the coast of California and sweep all across the land to Arizona and kill me. I listened to his argument and counter-argued that I'll consider his advice and said I'll let him know tomorrow at 8 a.m. Then I started doing research. I read websites and watched YouTube videos. I found a website that identified the problem and gave the solution, so I ordered 2 parts, the capacitor and the contactor. Recall that up until this time the technician had not mentioned the capacitor, and he should have because it's right next to the contactor, and it's the major cause of no cold air blowing out of the vents. I'm sure he knew this, but I think he might have been setting me up for a double scam. First the contactor, which he knew isn't the major cause. Then after he has my $200 and the problem isn't solved, he says, your capacitor is likely bad as well. And that's $500. Don't put it past them. But since you're a friend of mine, friend? You scalped me, and that makes us friends? I don't think so. Instead of $500, I'll give you the special price of just $495. This is what might have happened to me and you if you're as gullible as I was when I started this attempted repair of my AC. I called him back and told him that I just visited a web page called stevejenkins.com, and they had a Rheem air conditioner just like mine. I could tell he was deeply disturbed by this. They are always deeply disturbed when the veil of ignorance is lifted by someone who does their own research. Let's review, shall we? He came here and gave me a clue as to what is really wrong with my air conditioner. It's not the Freon. I don't have to spend $1,000 on R22 refrigerant. His knowledge was imparted to me, and now I know that the contactor is bad. I did some research on my own, and this made the technician sad. I was going to pay, and he left for an hour, but then he got called away. I watched some videos, read some websites, and my problem seems to be going away. What can he say? It will break down again one day. You better give me $200 for some used parts I have, because I want to make $200 on the side today. Sorry, guy, you were called away, and it saved the day, for me anyway. I gave you a free Whirlpool dryer that didn't work, needed parts, and was just junk to me. You returned the favor by discovering what's wrong with my air conditioner and telling me. Whatever he earns from fixing that dryer is what he gets for tipping me off that it's not the R22 refrigerant that is low. It's also not the contactor alone. His testing was a good start, but his diagnosis and his attempt to scam me were both, in the end, incomplete. That's a treat. A lucky day like this is hard to beat. Had I paid him $200, the problem would still not have been solved. Without a changed capacitor, the system would not blow cold air. He would clip me again when the system still did not work, and my money would be gone, and I'd be standing there pulling out my hair. He didn't mention the real problem, which is likely the capacitor, according to Steve Jenkins, super ream air conditioning technician. Thank you, Steve Jenkins, for diagnosing my problem and enabling me to escape the technician's claws. I saved $200, and since you're responsible, you get the applause. There is someone else to thank because they run a parts business. Thank you, Supply House, for having the contactor at a reasonable price. That was also nice. Looking back, you participated in saving me almost $200, and I sincerely appreciate that. I want to thank myself also for having research skills and being smart enough to act on just a clue as to what's really wrong with my air conditioning system to avoid getting scammed by this rat. As I read over the Steve Jenkins website, there were photos on the page. The parts were identical to mine. That was comforting. The writer wrote, when it's not blowing cold air, the number one cause is the capacitor and the number two cause is the contactor. What a surprise. So it's not the contactor and the corroded points of contact. It's the capacitor, most likely. I'll remember that. When you're being set up for a scam, they solve the secondary problem first. You know you're being set up when they tell you that this solution might not be all that's wrong. Don't leap into any repair regimen until you have correctly diagnosed the problem you're trying to solve. And the internet is where you go while you put the technician on hold. Tell him to take his next call and call you in an hour. I got lucky. I learned from the Steve Jenkins website that the number one cause is the capacitor when the ream unit isn't blowing cold air, and the second most common problem is the contactor. Without this knowledge, I'd have been a cooked goose. This guy would have installed the contactor and charged me an excessive fee of $200, then come back for the big kill. His big profit was killed that day when he was suddenly and unexpectedly called away. So the next morning at 8 a.m. I kept my promise and called back the Whirlpool AC scam, hit them with the high price and then reduce it by $100 guy. He was en route to a job, and as he drove, I told him that I've been thinking about his advice. I have decided to install the contactor as he recommended. In fact, I found a website called stevejenkins.com, and he had a ream air conditioner just like mine. On Jenkins's website, he said the most likely cause of an AC system not blowing cold air is the capacitor, not the contactor. The technician said, "Huh." I told him that I looked up the parts and found the contactor and the capacitor and ordered both. This made him angry, I could tell. He just lost $200, plus any additional charges when the replacement of the contactor didn't solve the problem. I continued because I had to let him know that he's not going to get the work if I do it myself. I said the price of the contactor was just $10.95, not $300 as his company charges. And your special low price of just $200 is way too high. At that point, he said I was giving him far too much detail and that he's driving and he doesn't have time to hear what I'm trying to tell him. So I said, "Okay, we'll talk later," and I hung up. He called back in less than a minute, but I did not pick up the phone because he was obviously disappointed and a bit rude, and for me, there was nothing left to say. I already dropped the bomb on him. What else can I say? He left no message, so I think he was acting emotionally and likely wanted to tell me off. But while the phone was ringing, he decided not to. I'm thinking back to the incident. I remember thinking of that tiny device called a contactor. I asked him how much that tiny little device costs. It's only about 1.5 inches by 2.5 inches and made mostly of plastic. This is when he set me up for the big discount scam price. He said, "I'll have to check my book," and he went out to the truck. This is called making it look good. If it's in his book, then the book must have been written by God, right? It's always more believable if it's in a book. So he checked his book and announced a price of $300 for a contactor. This is the normal price, but for me, he can do it cheaper, say $200. And did I fall for it? Yes, I did. Hook, line, sinker, rod, reel, and bait. I was a fish on his hook until he said, "I'll be back in an hour." That's when I kicked into action. So when you are in a spot like this, think. Remember my experience and learn from it. Let me repeat what happened so you see the technique. When he went to his truck, I followed him because I wanted to know. He opened a loose-leaf book and said, "My company charges $300, but I'll give you a better deal." I said, "I'm not paying $300 for that little device." He said he'd do it for $200, and because the psychology was favorable, coming down from $300, I agreed like a light beer drinking fool. That's when he said he'd come back in an hour. For me, that was time enough to escape. So I didn't waste time. I got a fingernail file and immediately started filing down those contact points, 2 on top and 2 on the bottom of this little device. Here is a picture of it. After filing for a while, I felt that was good enough, and I went inside, turned on the air conditioning at the thermostat, and it came on, worked fine, and cooled the house. I called the technician, and he said he can't come now because his boss called him and he has to go scam some other customer. I'm just kidding. He said he had another call and can't come now. I said, "It's okay. I filed down the contact points on the contactor and the air conditioning is working fine. I want to let it run for a couple of days to see how it goes." He was very disturbed by this and began to persuade me to change the part, spend $200, and have the peace of mind that losing $200 to a scam artist gives someone like me. The only problem is I'm not going for the scam. After a while, I started thinking about the electric bill and ran over to the thermostat to turn it off. Next, I went online to find the part because he made me feel uncomfortable telling me that it can go out at any second and I should have it replaced since it failed once. I found a company and they had the part. It cost $10.95, as you can see. Now I'm really angry. I nearly got clipped by a scam artist who charges $200 for an $11 part. Has this happened to you? At the bottom of the page, they had a recommended capacitor. It was rated 35/3. The first number, 35, is the microfarad rating for the condenser, and the 5 is the microfarads for the fan. MFD is what they use, but it stands for microfarad units. What I learned by watching YouTube videos is you can go up or down 10%, but not more. This is useful information. My capacitor is 370 volts, and that's okay, but I was wondering what my unit needs in respect to microfarads. So I took my camera out there and began shooting images and took them inside to view on my computer. I can't see the rating, so it might be 35/3 as the capacitor I just ordered was, or it might be 45/5. I then went to Amazon to see if they had my part numbers, and they didn't. But they had the replacement parts that were equivalent. The Amazon vendor said in his ad that my ream needs 45/5. At that point, I knew I had ordered the wrong capacitor. I called and got a supply house representative named David K., and he said he would cancel the order, and so he did. He said he doesn't have the part I need, and so I went to Amazon and ordered it there. The Amazon vendor had no reviews yet. I know it's risky to order from any vendor who hasn't any reviews, but I wanted that capacitor so I can be cool like a Heineken on tap. As for the air conditioning scam, watch YouTube videos on any problem you have at home or with your car. Become knowledgeable about the problem. This stuff isn't that difficult to learn. The mechanic or technician will tell you how to install parts and show you as well, because he wants to be famous like a movie star. There isn't much to learn. A capacitor stores electricity. The contactor delivers power to the fan and the condenser. The wires are marked. You can't touch the capacitor because it will shock you. You have to learn about the dangers before you go in there with a screwdriver and get a shock. If you know nothing about the parts, you're going to get experienced fast. These guys make 5 calls a day. If they clip customers for $200 each, how much do they make in 1 day or 1 year? $1,000 a day. 5 calls daily isn't the limit, you know. I'm using this number to do some quick math to see how lucrative it is to scam old people. If he makes just 5 calls a day, is this technician worth $1,000 per day or $30,000 per month? I don't think so. He has a little too much spending money, if you ask me. One air conditioning guy told me he makes 15 calls a day with a helper. And when he came to my house, the helper did all the dirty work climbing under the house where there could be rattlesnakes. I wonder how many helpers he goes through each year. Bury this one, hire that one. This was a few years back, maybe 2010. I used my calculator to figure out how much bread this guy is pulling down, and it was astounding. He was an honest air conditioning guy, but I think the new guy who came for the free dryer wasn't so honest. Based on what I told you, do you think he's honest? Quoting me a price of $300 right out of the company notebook and then offering to do it outside the company for just $200. And the part costs $11. My advice is for you to look up things like parts. and confirm that it's a $300 part. Never agree to any price, even if it appears that he shaved off 1/3 of the quoted price, until you have a chance to verify that this part costs $300 normally. Don't be fooled by the discounting of the part, shaving off $100, because the new lower price is still a scam. It begins as an overcharge of nearly $300 and then a reduction for the psychology, and after all, it isn't a discount at all. It's still a gouge, I found. Fortunately, this guy was called out on another job and he couldn't work for sucker me. I almost got scammed, and some of you have been scammed and you still don't even know it. You go to work, earn $300 after taxes, so it's really $400, and then you hand the $300 net to some scam artist in air conditioning. Let's review what I did that saved me money. I read a very interesting webpage, stevejenkins.com, on YouTube. He had photos of the same air conditioning unit that I have. That unit had the same problem that I was having. The author said that the number one cause of a system that's not blowing cold air is the capacitor, and the number two reason is the contactor. This was one awakening. Then I watched some videos done by good-hearted technicians who teach on video how to service your own air conditioning unit, and I found all of the education helpful. Today I was on the phone with an electrician who wanted to scam me too. He advised me to stay away from YouTube videos and the internet. I told him that I'll decide what to watch, not him. They fear this age of information because it's quite easy to discover that you're being scammed. They can charge a fair hourly rate and make a reasonable living, but $30,000 per month is a bit much for a technician. I have learned enough in the past 2 days to do some of the work on my air conditioning unit, and I want you to take on the challenge too. We can beat the scam artists. They prey on us as if we are rabbits. Each wants to kill 10 or 20 a day. I say no way. I'm not going to get screwed by anyone, electrician or technician. It's my decision, and I will seek the information at my own volition and rely on my own cognition. Be it an electrician with a mission or an air conditioning technician who is fishing for a fool, I won't be had. I'll go to school. It's not that easy to fool a fish who has been to school, now is it? I'm not that easy to fool or fish, but I almost wound up the fish of each of these scammers' dish and not achieving the repairs that I had wished. See you next time. Bye-bye. Air conditioning scam. My browser opens to the free stuff on Craigslist. I obtained a nice patio swing this way. It isn't new, but it's okay. A new one is $700. If it's free, how good does it have to be? Some people pick up washers and dryers and they repair them. It's easy to learn how to fix them. They're not very complicated. People make a little side money this way. Recently, I advertised on Craigslist to give away a nice Whirlpool dryer that didn't work. Needed some parts. A man called for it and shortly thereafter showed up at my door to get it. I was eager to get rid of it, and he seemed eager to get it free. This is what I call win-win. Normally, those who come for free stuff are poor, and so I was surprised that this guy was driving a big, beautiful, new red truck. I wish I was the owner of that truck. So right away I'm wondering what's going on here with this guy in the big, new red truck. We loaded the dryer of copper. The steel is worth something, but not much. If he has parts for it and just combines the parts to make one working unit and sells it, it might be worth it. But wait until I tell you about his racket in air conditioning. You'll wonder why he even bothers with Whirlpool dryers. He told me that he makes some money on the side repairing dryers and selling them, but the air conditioning business is his main job. After my experience with this technician, I'd say the air conditioning business is the gold mine, and you will soon see why I say that. What these guys do is not criminal, but maybe it should be because it's robbery. Like most professionals, those who know things take advantage of those who don't, and so in order to protect yourself, you must become aware. Watch YouTube videos made to tell you things, like air conditioning and auto repair tasks. The more you know, the fewer bags of money these crooks can take from you. When a major appliance goes out, people don't know what went wrong, especially old women, who I think are most vulnerable to the thieves. Few consumers know how many parts there are into the bed of the truck, and he was about to drive off. Then he said, "Ordinarily, I do air conditioning." I quickly jumped on that opportunity. I said, "My system needs Freon, but it's R22. I diagnosed it myself. It seemed to be low on refrigerant. It was not blowing cold air. What would you assume the problem was? It's a 4-ton Rheem air conditioner, 10 SEER. I don't want to charge it with refrigerant that costs an arm and a leg. R22 is very expensive. I was thinking of converting the system to 134A. When you do this, you have to put in new seals because the compressor will blow out. The system is made for a particular refrigerant and you can't mix them. This refrigerant is so expensive that recharging the system with R22 could exceed the cost of an entirely new condenser, so I'm thinking conversion instead of recharge. My reasoning is that once you switch out of R22, you don't have to pay mafia prices for refrigerant. The only question is, will the unit last? It wasn't made for 134A, and there are or what each one does. The public knows nothing about the cost of these parts. From what I have learned, the air conditioner is really very simple. In a week or less, one can begin to acquire the knowledge needed for troubleshooting air conditioning problems. I did it in less than 1 hour. I found a website that showed my exact unit, and it had the same problem I had, so I know you can do it too. We have a powerful weapon, the internet, so we can research and find videos and websites to help us understand quickly. Often these videos show your exact unit, as in my case. There is a fan and a condenser, which many of you know about. But there is also a capacitor which stores electricity and a contactor which has something that looks like points on an old car. I'm not a technician or a mechanic, but I still find this all quite fascinating. I am still learning and my mind is still growing new neural pathways. The capacitor stores 370 volts. I have become aware that some capacitors store 400 problems to consider. I don't see the justification of buying more of this antiquated, discontinued, and obsolete refrigerant, which has become scarce since it was outlawed. Every year, R22 becomes more scarce and more expensive. Today, it's over $100 per pound and rising very fast. Another consideration I've read about, there is no way to measure how much R22 you're getting, so you're getting experienced when these guys come out to recharge your unit. They leave with so many bags of your money that you have to use a dolly and forklift to load it into their shiny new red truck. The technician took a look at my air conditioning unit and frankly, his skills impressed me at first. He seemed adept and knew exactly what to do. I gathered that he was the type of guy who has vast knowledge about many things, including whirlpool dryers. That's probably why he picked up mine, and I'm sure he can easily fix it. If not, the salvage value might justify his time in coming for it and looking at the issues with it. The motor inside has a lot of